The second of the CIPS exam techniques workshop. This follows on from the general approach to CIPS self-study, which is already on YouTube. This session is going to be in two parts. The first will cover the unseen case studies, which are at D3 sourcing, AD1 management, AD2 managing risks, and PD1 leadership. And in that half of the session, I'm going to cover off how these differ from the straight essay-based exam questions and hints and tips for exam success, and those, as always, based on my own experience. The second half of the session is going to cover the pre-released case studies, and there are two of those, one at AD3 Improving Competitiveness and one at PD3, which is the Strategic Supply Chain Management. Approaches to the study that do differ from the other case studies and the exam technique for these exams. These ones are open book, so they do differ from other exams in the CIPS series. The second part of this session is looking at the open book case study. Now, this one is different. It's a pre-released case study which is sent to you about a month before the exam. It's also available on the website, so if you're further away from the UK, then download it from the website rather than waiting for it to come in the post. The ability to see the case study ahead of time and to bring your papers, notes and any other books with you into the exam means you do have to have a completely different approach to your study and preparation. It is a large document, it's about 12 to 15 pages long, so you do need to allow yourself enough time to read through and understand what's in there. So before the case study has been released, and the month or so that you've got before then, understand where the learning outcomes are in your textbook. And particularly if the chapters are not quite in learning outcome order. A few of the CIPS textbooks are not in that logical order for the learning outcomes. You may want to try and mark up the textbook, particularly with tabs, so that you know where particular areas or learning outcomes are. Lesson learned from my approach to this is don't have too many tabs. I ended up with so many around the edge of the textbook that I actually had to refer back to the index anyway because I was spending too long looking through the tabs to find what I needed. Use the time before the release of the case study to make sure that you've got a good understanding of the models and the theory that is being presented to you. Now's your time to do that research, particularly if the models are not well presented or if they're not fully explained. Ask on the groups on LinkedIn, work with a study group, or ask your colleagues to help. So, the case study has been released. Now is the time for you to start putting that learning into practice. First of all, make sure you understand the layout of the case study. Just like with the textbook, you don't need to go as far as memorising the content, because you'll have it in the exam with you after all, but you do need to know where areas are. You don't want to be wasting time in the exam, flicking backwards and forwards, trying to find a particular paragraph to quote. You may want to look up particular aspects of the case study. There's certain areas that might be interesting, or you might want to get a bit more of the background. CIPS does give you the links for the references that they've used. The case studies are all based on fact, but do be careful of going down rabbit holes. My case study at PD3 was on Tesco's, which is a UK supermarket, and part of it included the horse meat scandal. That absolutely fascinated me at the time, being aware of the issues that had come out over horse meat getting into the supply chain. So I ended up going down the route of looking at food fraud, digging into the Auditor General's reports, and that wasted a lot of time. It was very interesting. I still find it a fascinating area to look into, but it was of no use to me in the exam. So now you've read through the case study, you've read through and understand the textbook, now it's the time to apply the two together. How do the learning outcomes work together with the practice that's been provided in the case study? You can't write a whole load of models up as a model answer and then just stick that bit of paper into the exam, but you can take examples like SWOT, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats, or the PESTLE analysis, apply them from the case study, take that paper into the exam, and then use it as a basis for the information in the answer. A key warning is don't try to write out prepared answers, even for copying them out. You can't second guess what the examiners are going to be asking, and there may even be new information provided in the exam that alters something that's in the case study. Even a slightly different angle on a question to what you're expecting could throw out your answer, and a better use of your time would be to make those comparisons of the learning outcomes to the case study. As with the review of the textbook and knowing where the sections are in the case study, do make sure that your notes are in logical order. I prefer to have them in learning outcomes order, because then you know that each section is going to match up with a question in the exam. Do reference and cite any resources that you use, either from the case study or from external sources if you've done extra research on the web. You need those references in the exam. They are really hot on plagiarism. Even if you're just using information from the case study, say as the CE told us on page 5, or from the textbook model on page 23 states. Do check past papers and assessors' reports. Whilst you can't relate the questions back to your particular case study, they do give you an example of types of questions that are asked, the areas that are covered, and also, far more importantly, in the assessors' reports, it gives you the depth of information that is needed and, again, any common mistakes. Do also note the differences, as with all the CIPS exams, the differences between the advanced diploma and the professional diploma, moving from your tactical procurement to your strategic procurement. It's come to the day of the exam. So, taking a look at some hints for the exam technique. First of all, and absolutely key, take your copy of the case study into the exam with you. There won't be spare copies provided. Do take your textbook and other reference materials with you. You will be expected to cite models and other areas of theory with far more accuracy than you are in the closed book exams, because the examiners know that you've got access to the textbooks. On the other hand, it's not great to spend time copying out huge chunks of the textbook, because again, they know that you've got access to that. You must reference any work used. Plagiarism can get people scrubbed from the exam. Now, one area which is really key is don't overcrowd your answers. 3 hours might seem a long time when you've got all the books and information in front of you, but it actually goes by very quickly. And it's not an exam in how to get as much information as possible down onto the sheet. Make sure that your answers are pertinent. It can be heartbreaking when you've learnt something or written out a model and you can't use it, but it's still there in your heart for future times. And that's it. Are there any questions on the open book?
No.
No? There is further support on the web links provided. These range from the CIPS's guide for diploma exams. I've given the higher level web page here because that also includes some generalised hints and tips for the entire exam series. I really recommend that you read the guide through and take account of the hints and tips that they've got in there. There are 2 LinkedIn groups. CIPS Students Australasia, which is run by Fiona McDonald, who is the current CIPS Australasia student representative, and the CIPS Student Members, which is a UK run by a lady called Sue, who is a tutor in the UK, but it does have global coverage for its students. There's also, for your open book exam, a really good article on supply management on how to prepare for that exam, and I really recommend reading that through as well. So, thank you very much for coming along today, and good luck in the exam.